Almost exactly 5 years ago, I made a video taking a look at the best footballers at every age, from 16 to 40. With 636,000 views, it is the 40th most watched video in the history of this channel, and for some reason, loads of people seem to enjoy it. So much so, in fact, that barely a week has passed over the intervening 260 weeks in which I haven't been asked to make an updated version, and a handful of other channels and websites, the Sport Bibles and TalkSports of this world, decided that they liked the idea so much that they were going to directly copy it. I don't really mind. It is hardly the most novel idea, the best footballer at every age. I'm sure there must have been someone who did it before me, but it was a bit suspicious when they all picked the exact same players, including then Chievo goalkeeper Stefano Sorrentino at 39, who, I think it would be fair to say, isn't exactly a household name in the Anglophone world. Anyway, if they can rip me off, why can't I? I refused to make an updated version for a long time because, inevitably, if I'd made a video just a year after the first one, it would feature almost the exact same players, just 1 year older. Which, doesn't seem particularly interesting or entertaining. For the first time though, 5 years on, with everyone having aged a fair bit, well, by about 5 years in most instances, I'd imagine, I drafted an updated version and decided that it was different enough to go ahead with. Of the 25 inclusions required to cover every age from 16 to 40, only 6 players who featured 5 years ago feature once again this time around. Have a stab at guessing those 6 before we begin. Only if you want, no one's forcing you, but it might be fun, and I'll tell you who they were at the end. And you can give yourselves a jolly good pat on the back if you get more than 3 of them right. I would say that 3 should be gettable, so there's no pat on the back for that. And if you get fewer than 3, well, you should really hang your head in shame and be getting coal for Christmas. Without further ado then, who surprisingly doesn't feature at age 34, here is an updated look at the best footballer at every age from 16 to 40. 16. Lamine Yamal. A very easy opening inclusion, partly because Lamine Yamal is an outstanding prospect, and partly because 16 is just so young. It is rare for players even to have made their debuts at 16, yet Yamal, a Catalan native of Moroccan and Equatorial descent, has already made 25 appearances in the Barcelona first team and has won 4 caps for Spain, scoring goals in 2 of those games against Cyprus and Georgia. Frighteningly talented, Yamal made his debut at the end of last season, replacing fellow Wonderkid Gavi in a game against Girona, where he was only 15 years, 9 months and 16 days old, thus making him the youngest player to ever appear in the Barcelona first team. An archetypal La Masia graduate, in terms of his impeccable touch, technique, and the way in which he views the game, Yamal can play in a variety of different roles. But he looks happiest coming in off the right onto his favoured left foot, a bit like another fairly well-known La Masia alumni. 17. Endrick. A much tougher decision than 16, there's no doubt that Endrick is the most talked about 17-year-old in world football right now, but there is some stiff competition for the title of the best. Warren Zaire-Emery, perhaps most notably, has already made 50 appearances in a PSG super team, which is absolutely absurd, in addition to having won 1 cap and scored 1 goal in an even more competitive France team. And another La Masia graduate, Marc Guiu, is deserving of at least an extremely honourable mention. Guiu, unlike Yamal, isn't typical of the Barca mould. He is a 6'2" athlete who is formidable in aerial duels, but 10 goals in only 17 appearances for Spain's under-17s, and 2 goals from his first 3 games in the Barcelona first team means that he is unfortunate not to feature, even if he is about to turn 18. Endrick, on the other hand, is younger than either Zaire-Emery or Guiu, but one could argue that he is already Palmeiras' star man, and he has an excellent opportunity to establish himself as Brazil's first-choice number 9, ahead of either Richarlison or Gabriel Jesus. Since making his first-team debut less than 15 months ago, Endrick has scored 17 goals in 60 games, 6 of which came in his last 8 appearances. Endrick has already agreed to join Real Madrid next summer in a deal worth up to €72 million. 18. Vitor Roque. Brazilian football might be in the doldrums right now, but there are green shoots of recovery for Brazil fans to cling on to. 3 promising teenagers have made their Brazil debuts over the last 9 months, and 2 of them feature in this video. Vitor Roque is a quick, gifted, and increasingly clinical forward who can play off the right or, more commonly, through the middle. A graduate of the Cruzeiro youth ranks in April 2022 following 16 appearances for the then Serie B team owned by former Brazilian Wonderkid Ronaldo, Atlético Paranaense activated Roque's release clause, signing him for a club record fee. In total, still aged only 18, Roque has already made an incredible 97 first-team appearances, scoring 35 goals, making 13 assists, winning 1 cap for Brazil, and making the Copa Libertadores team of the tournament. Like Endrick, Roque has already agreed to join a La Liga giant, Barcelona in his case, for €40 million next month. 19. Gavi. Already mentioned once in this video, now Gavi features in his own right, though not without fierce competition. The likes of Romeo Lavia, Evan Ferguson, Rico Lewis, and Benfica's João Neves, who must have the most Portuguese-sounding name of all time, are all age 19. But Gavi is the standout, obvious, and I think the right inclusion. Gavi joined Barcelona from Real Betis at the age of 11, and at the age of 19, he's already part of the furniture. Now in his 3rd season of regular first-team football, Gavi has made 111 first-team appearances for Barca, as well as winning an absolutely outrageous 27 caps for Spain. Capable of gracing, and indeed improving pretty much any midfield in world football, Gavi is masterful at receiving the ball on the half-turn, wriggling free of a challenge, and setting an attack in motion with his vision and quick thinking. He's also increasingly adept off the ball, and was very much still improving, so it is a great shame about his recent season-ending ACL tear. 20. Jude Bellingham. This might seem like one of the easiest inclusions in this entire video, but hard as it may be to believe, I actually think that Jude Bellingham has stiff competition. Florian Wirtz is the star man for a Bayer Leverkusen side that currently leads the Bundesliga table, and that is after already having bounced back from an ACL injury. He would be a very worthy inclusion therefore, as would Jamal Musiala, but it's extremely difficult to look beyond Bellingham. Just absolutely flawless in terms of every stage of his development, Bellingham has taken every challenge in his stride and made it seem like it was no challenge at all. Starring in the Championship at 16, tick. Hitting the ground running at Borussia Dortmund at 17, tick. Becoming one of England's star men still in his teens, tick. Becoming Real Madrid's star man at 20, tick, tick, tick. Bellingham has completed it, mate. The best young player in the world right now, and arguably, I think, the best, or at least the most decisive player of any age, Bellingham is not just ridiculously gifted and complete, his sense of self-belief right now is absolutely off the charts, and his tendency to produce in so-called clutch moments is an illustration of that fact. 21. Eduardo Camavinga. The hardest decision up to this point, Eduardo Camavinga and Pedri are very different footballers, but I think that you could make a case for either of them being the best 21-year-old footballer in the world right now, with a quick shout out for the joke of a player that is Jeremy Doku. I think that Pedri is probably more talented than Camavinga, and about a year or so ago, it felt as though, even at the age of 20, he was sort of the one carrying Barcelona. And a lack of rest, because of that fact, has probably contributed to his persistent injury problems. Camavinga has never been the main man for either Real Madrid or France, but he has been incredibly dependable and consistent. His physical and mental attributes are out of this world for someone so young, and he has been superb every time that I've seen him at Real Madrid so far this season. A force of nature in midfield, Camavinga is quick, strong, he can run for days, he's brilliant at sniffing out danger and winning the ball back, he's tidy in possession, and very rarely misplaces a pass. It was a toss-up between the two of them, and, all being well, both should be among the best midfielders in the world for the next decade and beyond. 22. Bukayo Saka. There are a plethora of candidates at the age of 22, from Bukayo Saka's Arsenal teammate William Saliba, who is already among the best centre-backs in the world, to Kvicha Kvaratskhelia, Rodrigo, Enzo Fernandez, and Moises Caicedo. I know it's very popular to dunk on Caicedo right now, but I still think that he is a phenomenon, more than capable, of becoming one of the best midfielders in the world. Rodrigo is perhaps the most talented of the bunch, and arguably Silva the most formidable in his position, but best is the adjective in question, and right now, that steers me towards Saka. Most supremely talented young forwards start out full of extravagance and flair before becoming more ruthless and efficient. Saka just seems to have skipped that initial stage. Aged 22, he is already incredibly efficient on the ball and productive in the final third, and his decision-making is better than most top players 10 years his senior. 23. Erling Haaland. It's a bit boring, but at 23, obviously it has to be Erling Haaland. He might have suffered a recent slump in form, by his standards, and have been sidelined with a knock, but we're not about to forget the fact that he scored 52 goals in 53 games for a treble-winning team last season. You can overlook these things when living through them in real time, but that is all-timer stuff. Only a handful of players have ever had a season like that, even if Haaland isn't as graceful or as aesthetically pleasing to watch as other players who have had seasons of that ilk. Even this season, in which it feels as though Haaland's standards have slightly dropped, he has scored 19 goals in 22 games. Throughout his brief career as a whole, aged 23, Haaland has already scored 226 goals in 275 games at club level and 27 goals from 29 caps for Norway. It is absurd. Honourable mentions go to Vinicius Jr., Phil Foden, and Aurelien Tchouameni, but in reality, none of them ever stood a chance. 24. Declan Rice. By far the most difficult decision yet, I have flip-flopped about 4 times between Victor Osimhen and Declan Rice. On the one hand, Osimhen was the main man for a team that won their first Serie A title in over 30 years last season, scoring 31 goals in 39 games, and I am generally of the belief that it is more difficult to be a world-class attacking player than a more defensive one. On the other hand, Declan Rice has quite possibly been the best player in the best league in the world this season. His influence upon an already formidable Arsenal team has exceeded just about anyone's expectations, and I'm not really sure what more he could do to feature if I didn't go for him. Ultimately, I'm still undecided. I just think that Rice would probably come ahead of Osimhen if I was picking a World 11, like in a draft format. Obviously, they play in very different positions, but I'm not even entirely convinced about that. Honourable mentions go to Ronald Araujo, Rafael Leao, and Alexander Isak, but there's probably no need to further complicate matters. 25. Kylian Mbappe. It is a frightening prospect, but I think that Kylian Mbappe is probably just entering his prime. He is still as quick as ever, fortunately having avoided any major recurring muscle injuries, but he is more intelligent, refined, and, it is that word again, efficient than ever before. Mbappe has literally just turned 25 a few days ago, and his CV before reaching that milestone is quite frankly out of this world. He has already scored 264 goals in 354 games at club level for Monaco and PSG. He's struck 46 times from 75 caps for France. He has won a World Cup final, scored a hat-trick in another one, and won a myriad of individual accolades. Shoutouts go to Martin Odegaard, Fede Valverde, Eder Militao and Trent Alexander-Arnold, but this was maybe the easiest decision in this entire video. 26. Lautaro Martinez. From a very easy decision to an extraordinarily difficult one, my 3 leading candidates at 26 are Ruben Dias, Lautaro Martinez, and Frenkie de Jong, with Bruno Guimaraes, Gabriel Jesus, and Luis Diaz not too far behind. Diaz and de Jong are both world-class players in their respective positions, and have been for some time, which means that I am inevitably going to take some heat for picking Martinez ahead of them. For anyone who doesn't watch much of Inter Milan, Martinez is that guy who spurned a load of chances at the World Cup and was dropped for Julian Alvarez. And he is that guy, but he's not just that guy. The reality is that there's a reason why Martinez was starting for the eventual World Cup winners going into the tournament, and that's because he has been outstanding at the San Siro for the last 2 to 3 years. An incredible athlete, Martinez is lightning quick, never seems to tire, and he is such a bright spark in the final third. This season, he has scored 15 goals and made 4 assists in only 16 Serie A appearances. So, very narrowly, he's my choice ahead of Diaz and De Jong. 27. Rodri. A massive shout out must go to Leroy Sané at the age of 27, who is so ferociously talented and has been back to something close to his best or even exceeding his previous best at Bayern Munich this season, with 16 goal contributions in 15 Bundesliga appearances so far this term, but I can't look beyond Rodri. The best pivot on the planet at this moment in time, Rodri was bordering upon faultless last season and was without doubt one of Man City's 3 most important players in their treble-winning campaign. As intelligent as they come, Rodri isn't just capable of dictating a game, offering a permanent outball, speeding up his own team's attacks and neutralising the opposition's, he's also capable, as we saw in the Champions League final, of coming up big when it matters most. All round, just a world-class footballer, a shoo-in for pretty much any World 11 right now, and a safe inclusion in this video. 28. Joshua Kimmich. If anyone were to rival Rodri for that midfield pivot role in a World 11 at this moment in time, it would probably be Joshua Kimmich. 1 year older than the Spaniard, Kimmich has already won 82 caps for Germany, compared to Rodri's 48 for Spain, though his international career has hardly been a joyous one to date. Following a second successive World Cup group stage exit in Qatar, Kimmich described it as the worst day of his career to date and said that he feared that his international career would always be associated with failure. That certainly isn't true of his club career, where Kimmich has already won 20 trophies, including 8 Bundesliga titles and a UEFA Champions League. Formerly a right-back, but now an all-round tour de force from holding midfield, if he stays at Bayern, you would have to imagine that he would be a strong contender to replace Manuel Neuer as club captain. Honourable mentions go to Jack Grealish, Mike Maignan, and Kimmich's Bayern teammate Serge Gnabry. 29. Bernardo Silva. A manager's dream, Bernardo Silva could play for any team, in any era, and in almost any position. Wherever he plays, Silva is a technical marvel with a first-class football brain and very few weaknesses to his game. Only 5'8" and slight, Silva is nonetheless a workhorse who never stops pressing, while still being one of the most gifted players in the Premier League in possession and in the pass. The third Manchester City treble winner to feature so far, this is Silva's 7th season at the Etihad, and he will go down as one of the club's greatest players of all time. Honourable mentions go to Silva's club and international teammates, Bruno Fernandes and John Stones. 30. Harry Kane. A very easy inclusion, Harry Kane is the best centre-forward in the world, and by far the best footballer who is currently 30 years of age. The next closest, in my mind, would probably be Jan Oblak, who is a goalkeeper, and, as we all know, they're not even really footballers. Incidentally, a couple of years ago, I took a fair bit of flack on here for saying that I thought Kane and Lewandowski were roughly neck and neck in terms of ability, with Lewandowski being a more lethal goal-scoring machine, but Kane being the better player all round. English bias, clueless, and have you suffered from a traumatic brain injury, came the responses, and that was just from my girlfriend. A couple of years on, playing in the same league as Lewandowski was then, Kane is currently scoring at a ratio beyond even anything that the Pole ever managed, while still offering a great deal more than goals. So, yeah, guess my girlfriend looks pretty stupid now, doesn't she? Where was I? Oh yeah, Kane's the best 30-year-old. Moving on. 31. Mohamed Salah. This is just a horrible age to pick from. There can be no doubt that Neymar is by far the most talented 31-year-old footballer on earth, and it isn't even close. But he has had rotten luck with injuries since the age of 25, is currently sidelined with an ACL injury, and has semi-retired, joining Al Hilal in Saudi Arabia. Thibaut Courtois and Alisson Becker, meanwhile, are probably the best goalkeepers in the world, and Heung-min Son and David Alaba are every bit worthy of the world-class tag. Ultimately, though, just because of Neymar's persistent absence and the fact that he is now playing in a second-rate league, I find it hard to look beyond Mohamed Salah. Whilst Neymar never made more than 22 league appearances in a season at PSG, Salah has never made fewer than 34 at Liverpool, and has shown remarkable consistency throughout that time. 32. Kevin De Bruyne. It's easy to have short memories in football, and though Kevin De Bruyne feels like a bit of an afterthought having been sidelined all season, it was only 6 months ago that he was, once again, arguably Manchester City's best player as they won the treble. For my money, probably the finest midfielder that the Premier League has ever seen, if not perhaps the greatest just yet. There is very little, at least in an offensive sense, that De Bruyne can't do. His technique is excellent, his vision is obviously out of this world, and his weight of pass borders upon faultless. When fit, he is still the best midfielder in England, if not all the world. Virgil van Dijk and Antoine Griezmann come a close second and third. 33. Ilkay Gundogan. In a straight shootout, age 33 is probably the trickiest decision in this video, between two players who tend to play in very similar positions. Toni Kroos and Ilkay Gundogan spent 10 years playing alongside one another in the German national team, between Gundogan's international debut in 2011 and Kroos' retirement from international football in 2021, though only after he had already won some 106 caps. Though Gundogan is a key man for Germany still, it seems unlikely that he'll ever eclipse that number of international appearances, owing to a series of long-term injuries that he suffered during his early years, including one which ruled him out of the 2014 World Cup that Germany won. For that reason, Kroos has had the better career, and even right now, I think that there is very little to split them. Gundogan has been absurdly good for the last 3.5 years though, and has immediately become one of Barcelona's best players. So in a very tight 50-50 call, I'd just about give it to him. I know that others will disagree though, quite reasonably, and on this one, I wouldn't argue with anyone who'd go for Kroos. Kyle Walker, meanwhile, is worthy of at least an honourable mention. 34. Thomas Muller. Thomas Muller is an incredibly worthy inclusion, but it must be said, there is a surprising lack of competition at the age of 34. Yeah, that's right. Currently 34-year-old footballers, you have had an easy ride for far too long. It's about time that someone called you out, and I'm brave enough to do it. Probably Muller's closest competitor is Villarreal midfielder Dani Parejo, who is excellent in fairness, but overall, it's slim pickings. Muller is one of the most productive footballers of the 21st century though. Perhaps not the easiest on the eye, his skills couldn't be described as silky or graceful, but by God are they effective. Muller's movement, anticipation, industry and all-round footballing intelligence are tremendous, and as much as he might not always look to be in full control, he actually has an excellent first touch and weight of pass. Muller has scored 279 goals and made 268 assists in 773 appearances for Bayern Munich, in addition to scoring 45 goals from 126 caps for Germany, and he has won it all at club and international level. At least someone, then, is still flying the flag proudly for 34-year-olds. 35. Robert Lewandowski. Angel Di Maria is still astonishingly good at football at the age of 35, especially for a winger, but obviously, at 35, I have to go for Robert Lewandowski. Almost as good as Harry Kane. It's a joke, alright, let it go. Lewandowski might have reached the age at which most footballers, on average, tend to retire, but he still can't stop scoring. Over his career as a whole, the Pole has scored 664 goals in 959 matches, which makes him the third most prolific goalscorer of his generation, trailing only Messi and Ronaldo. Since joining Barcelona, Lewandowski has scored 42 goals in 67 games, and unlike several similarly high-profile players around his age, he reportedly turned down an enormous contract offer to go and play in Saudi Arabia. 36. Lionel Messi. I think you could still argue that Lionel Messi is the best footballer in the world, though, inevitably, the longer that he spends playing outside of one of the world's elite leagues, the harder that it will become to make that case. 12 months ago, Messi was still the best player at the 2022 World Cup, which marked the crowning moment in a career which already had everything else. The best passer, dribbler, and goalscorer of his generation, and perhaps the best at combining all three in the entire history of the sport, the Messi of 2023 is very different from the Messi of 2013. These days, Messi barely moves for about 80 to 85 minutes of a game, seeming to be almost disinterested at times, but coming alive in little 10 to 15 second spells. It is in those spells that Messi is still the best player in the world, capable of winning games not just in Major League Soccer, but at the very highest level in an instant. For that reason, the 2023 Ballon d'Or winner features just ahead of the 2022 Ballon d'Or winner, Karim Benzema. 37. Manuel Neuer. The most influential goalkeeper of the modern era, Manuel Neuer brought about an entire generation of sweeper keepers, ushering in an era where Ederson can be hailed as one of the best in the business, despite not being particularly great at the actual goalkeeping part, and David De Gea can't get a club, despite spending about 7 years as the best player at Manchester United. Fortunately for Neuer, he could do it all. Daring and adventurous, but also blessed with outstanding handling and reflexes, at his best, having Neuer in your team felt like having a 1-goal advantage before a game had even begun. There was something about his presence and sheer aura that just seemed to have that effect, in addition to the fact that he was obviously one of the best keepers in the world. He isn't at his peak now, age 37, but he is still one of the best keepers in the world, and he features ahead of Sergio Ramos and Olivier Giroud. 38. Luka Modrić. Okay, here come the death threats from 12-year-olds. Brace yourself, boys, we had a good run. It was nice knowing you all. Yes, I think that a 38-year-old Luka Modrić is better than a 38-year-old Cristiano Ronaldo, despite the latter obviously having a far superior career and having been a much better player at his peak. Ronaldo is still scoring almost a goal a game for Al Nassr, but in a league where attendances have dipped below 200 for some games this season, and he only scored 1 in 10 in the Premier League last season before heading desert side. Just to be clear, Ronaldo is still absolutely incredible at the age of 38 and head and shoulders above any other 38-year-old other than Modrić, but the Real Madrid man is still pulling the strings at arguably the biggest club in the world, touching 40, and I think, even if it gets me killed, he is the right inclusion. 39. Thiago Silva. I think that, for the first time, Thiago Silva has shown some signs of regression this season, but the fact that I'm even saying that, and saying it tentatively, about a 39-year-old who is playing as a centre-back in the fastest-paced and most competitive league in world football is quite extraordinary in of itself. It's all the more extraordinary when one recalls that Thiago Silva first retired from football at the age of 21 after catching an almost fatal case of tuberculosis before his mother convinced him to change his mind. Silva, and the world of football, have Mrs. Silva to thank for one of the greatest centre-backs of the 21st century. Silva has racked up 786 appearances at club level, 113 caps for Brazil, and he has won over 30 trophies, including league titles in both Italy and France, and a Champions League with Chelsea. Last season, he made 35 appearances at Stamford Bridge, and his goal in a 4-4 draw with Manchester City earlier this season made him the 4th oldest goal scorer of the Premier League era, trailing only Teddy Sheringham, Dean Windass, and Ryan Giggs. 40. Pepe. It has been 6.5 years now since Pepe left Real Madrid, and he has been, arguably, just as good during that time as he was during his supposed peak in Madrid. In fact, given the way in which Pepe has matured, moderated his temper, and improved his leadership skills, you could even argue that in some ways he has actually improved. Pepe isn't just an old head who can read the game, kick it and head it. He is still no slouch when it comes to eating up ground, and unlike so many players in their 30s, let alone 40s, he doesn't seem to have lost hardly any of his explosive strength required for things like leaping and winning aerial duels. It is actually astonishing, and a fitting way in which to end this video, though it would be remiss of me not to give at least an honourable mention to Felipe Melo, who is still a very good footballer at 40 years of age, even if he is a fascist. Just as a bonus, over the age of 40, special shoutouts go to Pepe Reina, Alfredo Talavera, Fabio, Jesus Corona, and Nene. Remember him? He used to play for PSG and very briefly West Ham. Well, age 42, the Brazilian number 10 is still going strong, and he made 14 goal contributions in 28 league games for Juventud in the season just gone. As for the 6 players who featured 5 years ago, and featured once again this time around, if you can still remember that, who were your guesses? Lionel Messi, I would imagine, is the most obvious one. Robert Lewandowski probably didn't come as a huge surprise. Kylian Mbappe featured at age 20 last time, and at 25 this time around. Those were probably the easiest three to get. Then Harry Kane and Kevin De Bruyne for 5, and top marks if you guessed Joshua Kimmich, who completes the sextuple. And just because I did the same last time around, I thought that I'd spoil you all in the spirit of festive cheer and share with you what I think is probably the strongest starting 11 made up of players who featured in today's video. Manuel Neuer starts in goal, Joshua Kimmich returns to his former role at right back due to a lack of alternatives, Pepe and Thiago Silva form what is probably the world's oldest ever centre-back pairing, with a combined age of almost 80. Bernardo Silva gets the nod at left-back, a position which Pep Guardiola started him in against Bukayo Saka before you all start mocking me, and again, there aren't really any alternatives. Rodri starts at the base of our midfield, just ahead of Declan Rice. De Bruyne and Bellingham form a frightening pairing in front of him, and a front three of Messi, Kane and Mbappe ought to ensure plenty of goals. In truth, I would probably start Rice at centre-back ahead of Silva, but 3 out-of-position defenders in my back four seem to be a little bit excessive. You might find this hard to believe, but that is actually a much more balanced starting 11 than the one 5 years ago. Anyhow, thank you all very much as ever for watching. Hit the like button if you enjoyed today's video. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. And of course, I will see you all again in another 5 years, assuming that you only follow for this one video alone. I also think that an interesting video could be looking back at the one 5 years ago and doing a Where Are They Now version. So, let me know in the comments if you agree that that would be interesting. Just, putting a few feelers out there. As I say, follow, subscribe to both this channel and also my second channel, Alphabot's Armour, both of which should be about to appear on your screens now, along with a couple of videos that you might enjoy watching after this one. You can find all of those links, plus a whole lot more, down in the video description below. Cheers.